Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are cracking open one of history's most notorious, brain-bending puzzles, and we're exploring what researchers are now calling the homunculus protocol. You know, for over a century, ever since it was famously rediscovered back in 1912, this ancient text has literally baffled the greatest cryptographers on the planet. We're talking about a manuscript carbon dated to the early 15th century, where not a single word had been definitively deciphered. People have theorized everything from it being some intricate alien code to just an incredibly elaborate medieval hoax. But what if the answer wasn't buried in some impossibly complex mathematical cipher at all? What if the solution has literally been staring us right in the face this entire time, just waiting for a slight shift in perspective?
I know, that sounds almost too simple to be true, right? A book that has completely defeated brilliant scholars for hundreds of years solved by simply turning the thing around? But look, the breakthrough research we are walking through today proposes exactly that. It argues that this epic 800-year-old failure to translate the text was actually resolved with a simple 180-degree rotation. Basically, when you flip the pages upside down, these strange, alien-looking symbols stop being an unbreakable cipher and suddenly become highly specific practical English instructions.
For years, scholars have called these shapes gibberish glyphs, mainly because they seem to defy literally all known linguistic patterns. But when you apply that 180-degree rotation, a bizarre symbol instantly transforms perfectly into the English characters 8AW, which translates to the command, wait. Just like that, this isn't some mystical book of magical runes anymore. It completely transforms into a 13th century apothecary manual. We're looking at a highly technical laboratory guide authored by a brilliant and honestly super controversial scientist named Michael Scott.
Let's actually walk through this universal translation key, because these symbols are basically the core operating system of the entire manual. So an 8 isn't some mystery letter, it stands for a dram, which is a primary unit of weight. The 4P is a scruple, acting as a process valve or a separator in the lab. We just saw 8AW, which means stasis, or the specific wait time required for chemical rest. 8M tells the alchemist to macerate or soak the material. And 8V, that's the final refined extract. When you start reading the manuscript this way, it is wild. You are reading totally practical instructions for alchemical extraction that were just hiding in plain sight.
Now, to really grasp the magnitude of what we're looking at, we kind of need to ground this narrative in history. We have here a 13th century manuscript margin noting the work of Michael Scott. And Scott was an absolute towering intellectual of his day. He was the science advisor and court astrologer to the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. The guy was educated all across Europe, translated insanely complex works from Arabic, and even set up a fully equipped chemical laboratory down in Toledo, Spain, complete with crucibles and alembics. He was a man completely obsessed with the natural world, chemistry, and unlocking the deepest secrets of alchemy.
So, the absolutely crucial point here revolves around this highly specific number, 1.16. If you've ever glanced at the Voynich manuscript, you've probably noticed its bizarre biological section, right? It's filled with these incredibly complex drawings of pipes, tubs, and strange liquid flows. For centuries, everyone thought these were just weird anatomical charts, or maybe mythical plumbing systems. But using Michael Scott's newly translated glossary, we realize these tubs aren't plumbing at all. They are actually a visual calculator for a 1.16-bit entropy deficit.
Scott actually called this deficit the gap in the breath. And this is entirely about physics and chemistry. You see, during the extraction process, physical mass is naturally lost to evaporation and waste. To figure out the safe, final resting dosage of a medicine, you literally have to subtract this 1.16 factor from your raw starting weight. And the manuscript even includes these brilliant environmental adjustments. For instance, if you spot wavy lines in the diagrams, that translates to high humidity. The text then directly instructs you to add exactly one scruple, a fort party, of raw material just to balance out the increased mass loss from the damp air. It is incredibly precise science for the time.
Let's look at how these instructions were practically applied to highly dangerous plants like nightshade. Nightshade is incredibly toxic. You absolutely can't just boil it like some common herb and hope for the best. The manuscript classifies it as a sedative and a poison and dictates a super specific workflow. Step 1. You must measure it very carefully in scruples, or 4P. Step 2. You apply what they called winter cooling, which is actually indicated by the low star density drawn in the manuscript's zodiac sections. And Step 3. It requires extreme stabilization through what Scott called the triple stasis, written out as 8A, 8A, 8A. Literally a triple wait period just to make the poison safe enough for extraction.
Now, what's really fascinating about what we're looking at right here is the massive paradigm shift it reveals. You have to remember Michael Scott was employed by the emperor in large part to help refine gold, specifically for the emperor's famous Augustalis gold coins. The royal court basically wanted him to transmute lead into gold. But Scott's ultimate focus totally pivoted away from technical metallurgical chemistry. Instead, he became obsessed with mastering biological wetware. He started to see the heavy lead not just as a metal, but as a powerful metaphor for the human condition itself, the literal spark of the mind trapped inside heavy physical matter.
And this quote right here, it completely changes our understanding of Scott's life's work. I have found the gap in the breath. It is the place where the soul enters the matter. Remember that 1.16-bit entropy deficit we talked about? The physical mass that just vanishes to evaporation? Scott didn't look at that and just see a chemical waste byproduct. No, he viewed that exact mass loss as the precise physical space where the biological world and the divine actually interacted. To him, that was literally the gap where the soul enters physical matter.
But you might be wondering, how on earth did researchers actually find that quote? Because I assure you, it wasn't written plainly on the page for anyone to read. To hide his deeply philosophical and potentially heretical diary from the church, Scott embedded a secondary layer, totally beneath the apothecary instructions. To read it, researchers had to apply the triple filter protocol. First, you have to strip away all the technical command markers, the 8s and 4Ps, and then mirror flip the remaining shapes. Second, you have to read the sequence from the bottom of the page going up, and third, you sound out the resulting symbols phonetically. When you do all that, this completely hidden scribe's voice suddenly emerges. And this perfectly illustrates what researchers are calling the phonetic bridge. Michael Scott was an absolute master of languages. He essentially created a linguistic Trojan horse, utilizing foreign shapes like Arabic and runic symbols purely as phonetic placeholders for Old English sounds. So if he wanted to write a word that sounded like English, he'd draw a foreign symbol that naturally carried that specific sound. He was effectively masking his true personal thoughts right behind the visual noise of a technical laboratory manual. It's genius.
So why go through all this trouble? Why the elaborate cover-up? Well, this marginal note written by Michael Scott way back in 1221 serves as a pretty stark reminder of the terrifying historical stakes of his era. Scott's sheer brilliance, combined with his deep knowledge of the East and his bizarre experiments, sparked some incredibly vicious rumors. He was widely and publicly accused of necromancy and dark magic. If his radical philosophical views on the soul and alchemy had been read openly by the church, he faced the very real, literal threat of being burned at the stake as a heretic.
Which brings us to arguably the most emotional discovery in the entire text. When you apply that mirror protocol, strip away the laboratory weights, and phonetically read the runes hidden at the bottom of the pages, a desperate, recurring defense suddenly appears. It sounds out in Old English, "Ik neom diofol," "Ik eo man." Translating that into modern English, we get, "I am no devil, I am a man." I mean, just think about the sheer contrast here. We started this explainer looking at cold, rigid chemical equations for measuring nightshade and calculating evaporation deficits, but hidden right beneath those exact numbers is this desperate, terrified human confession. It's the intensely personal, phonetic defense of a genius, pleading with the future, desperately trying to prove his humanity against the brutal accusations of his own time. The final testament hidden away in this text completely reframes his life's work. Scott writes that the gold his emperor so desperately demanded is merely a byproduct of the truth. The real goal he realized was moving from the mechanical command of the hand, the raw, gritty laboratory work, to the profound understanding of the heart. He notes that a highly specific 44-day alchemical cycle was the true bridge to get there. His ultimate goal wasn't to create endless metallurgical wealth, but to achieve complete mastery over his own biological wetware. It was entirely about the transformation of the self. So we've just seen how a simple 180-degree turn totally transformed an unsolvable magical text into a profound piece of 13th century chemistry and philosophy. And honestly, it leaves us with such a provocative question. What other historical magic out there is simply science waiting for the right translation key? I mean, how much of our history is really just misunderstood logic, completely obscured by time, fear, and simply a lack of the right lens? It is an absolutely incredible thought to carry with you. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning what you see.